Okay, here we go to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today, we have a kind of special Tissot face-off for you guys, and it's a little comparison. These are two watches that I've owned for quite some time. They're very popular in terms of my channel and even across YouTube, and I think they're really great everyday choices. And they are, of course, kind of similarly kind of in the same price point, not too far off. But in terms of folks cross-shopping these, I could easily see somebody trying to figure out if they want to get the Powermatic 80 PRX or the Powermatic 80 Gentleman. So with that said, a little bit about Tissot. They were founded back in 1853. They're Swiss made, and they're part of the Swatch Group. They're part of the middle range, similar to Certina, Mito, or Hamilton, and kind of are overall considered within that entry level Swiss brand space. Although one thing that does separate Tissot from those other, aforementioned brands is that Tissot merging with Omega is actually what led to eventually what came to be known as the Swatch Group. So their history is a touch more pure than some of those other brands that are in a similar tier within the group. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I'd consider these both great everyday watches. Some key characteristics and styling, when you're looking for something that you can wear every day, you're of course going to be looking for that versatile blend of sporty and dressy attributes. So we do have on the left-hand side here the PRX Powermatic 80, and PRX stands for precise, robust, and actually having 10 atmospheres of water resistance. So it's basically a retro reissue of a classic model that came out about 10 years after Gerald Genta started the original integrated bracelet stainless steel watch craze. And the nice thing is, although this is a bit of a retro throwback, no Fotina is needed to kind of reach that. This goes for actually the price is for $650 retail. Of course, you can get it for less. And on the other side, we have the Gentleman Powermatic 80 Silicone, and it is a multi-purpose watch. It's both ergonomic and elegant in any circumstance, equally suitable for wearing in a business environment as it is for a weekend during leisure time. You can get this for, I think it's $775 retail, or you can get it for, I believe, around $540 something from Joma Shop, which is where I bought this one. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. All right, so two kind of medium-sized watches here, especially from the same brand and everything like that. But you can see they actually have really different dial kind of proportions. You can see the Gentleman definitely appears, for me, much larger than the PRX, although they're both considered 40 millimeter watches. This one's only 37 millimeters across the bezel for the PRX, versus here, this bezel, more clearly is going to be the full kind of length of, or say width of the case. And you can also see in terms of the way that they drape, it's definitely a very different wear profile. So, I mean, some of you guys, they're not very similar. Yeah, you're right. So if you want something more rounded, more organic, less fussy, then this Gentleman, it could be the Gentleman for you, where the PRX definitely has a lot of light play, a lot of angles, and then of course you get into the dial, which is really beautifully done, with kind of that waffle pattern mixing in with the blue sunray, so it stays actually rather dark, and then you just get kind of nice flares and pops of blue. Versus here, I mean, I think that it is also available with a blue dial and a silver dial and a couple different options. But this black dial is just so darn clean and just kind of goes with everything. You can see it even has the matching black date disc, which I really, really like. I think it flows really nice. It's nice to see the carryover of, white font on the dial, and then also white text in terms of the numerals, versus on the date here, it's definitely, which is very common for a blue dial to have a white date disc. So it does have that nice contrast to it. These both have Powermatic 80 movements, but they're slightly different. They both have 80 hours of power reserve, 3 hertz, which is 6 ticks per second in terms of their sweep. Just this one has a Nivacron balance spring, and this one has a silicone balance spring. So those are both non-metallic balance springs, but you know, I assume here that the silicone one is, you know, has some other properties that consider it better versus a Nivacron, you know, being metallic but non-magnetic versus silicon being non-metallic altogether. So there's definitely pros and cons there, but for the most of you, it's really not going to matter. They both come pretty well regulated out of the box in terms of when they arrive. But I will say, with these Powermatic 80 movements, they're not movements that you can just go take to a, you know, your typical local watchmaker and have them regulate, because they don't have the manual regulation points anymore. That's something that is missing from the old kind of ETA style that these were based off of. So now basically there's special tools and machines that need to be used to regulate these. So you can see similar affair here. You're not seeing the manual. Oh, looks like you can get the main. Looks like on this one there actually is a little bit of a manual tab, not for the fine adjustment but for the large adjustment. Interesting. And then you can see it also has the little S there. If I can get it at the right angle, you can see it right there, versus here just kind of more of an empty affair. Cool. So, you know, they're both going to be ticking at the same beat rate. So you can see it's going to be closer to more like a Seiko beat that you're used to versus something with a smoother sweep you would get from a more standard ETA base movement or Sellita base movement. But, you know, honestly, shouldn't probably complain too much about it when you think about the fact that, you know, Omega actually uses lower beat rates than 4 Hertz. They use 3.5, so instead of 8 ticks per second, it's like 7 ticks per second. So those are even, you know, already moving a little bit choppier compared. I mean, can you notice it with the human eye? Probably not. And especially in these types of watches, I mean, it's not like they're divers with some, you know, bold painted seconds hand. These are, you know, quite reflective, so they're going to disappear and reappear here and there. So it's probably a little bit easier for them to appear smooth. But yeah, there's quite a few differences. Of course, here you're getting the integrated style bracelets, so you're not going to have normal lugs, versus here you are getting normal lugs, but you're just not getting a normal lug width at 21 millimeters. That's just odd. I mean, it could have been 20 easily. It would have been better at 19, but at 21, you know, not the greatest. Seems a little wide, kind of for no reason. But I get that maybe with the wider bezel profile, that maybe they felt it was balanced a little bit better, especially since you're getting the reflective polished center links, versus here, you know, it's really just single link all the way through. And this is a little bit, let me just give it a quick wipe. So that's one thing that's going to be different between the two. You may find yourself wiping all of the polished surfaces on here because there's quite a few. But some things you'll also notice, let me just, it's like smudgy, so then you wipe it with a little, you know, microfiber, and then the microfiber leaves some dust. So never can make everybody happy. But you can see it has some really nice beveling. Check that out. So very cool. I wish that was kind of the only aspect that was polished. Of course, since the center links were polished, I'm fine with the bezel being polished. But if the bezel was brushed and the center links were brushed, I'd prefer that. So if you're listening, maybe you do like a gentleman adventurer, where you have more brushed elements, and then maybe swap out like the 12, the 6, and the 9 for numerals. I think that would be really cool. And since you already do have decent amount of water resistance at 10 bar or 100 meters, and that's for both of these, it would actually be totally cool. But the 21 millimeters might make it, you know, I wish that you did 20 millimeters just so that essentially it would make it more versatile for straps, whether it be NATO style straps or two-piece leather, nylon, fabric, you know, whatever it may be, hybrid straps. There's just so many options that are out there, and this is such a clean look. It would be nice to have some other options, but right now as it lays, this definitely is more of kind of a Rolex Datejust style versus a Rolex Explorer. But with the black dial, it definitely kind of crosses over into that, okay, hey, it could be, you know, maybe something within that same vein. Where here, a little bit less versatile, right? But definitely a lot more design language here that's very clear. It's, hey, this is a Genta, you know, style watch. It looks like a Rolex Oyster Quartz. It really has that look that's a very you know, very 70s, very retro, but it's very nice, and honestly it looks a lot more expensive than it is, versus I'd say here I think most people are going to know that this isn't some really luxurious watch. Like, nobody's going to think that this is a Datejust, you know, at least, you know, within decent distance from you. Versus here, some people might see this from far away, and because of the profile might imagine that it's, you know, I don't know, it's tough to say. You know, it does definitely have some features, whether it be the dial or the flat links that do make it similar to some very well-known and iconic watches. So both of these definitely do have that kind of, they look like them from afar, but then you get close and you're like, okay, no, they're totally different watches. But with that said, let's actually get these pieces on wrist and see how they wear against each other. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really well. Of course, if I get it too close to the camera, you're going to be getting some lens distortion. It's going to appear a bit larger, but if I keep it away from getting too close and maybe just bring the shot in a little bit tighter, you're going to get an idea of some of the details while still seeing it nicely centered on the top of my wrist. So again, nothing really to stand out, nothing to offend. And so it just really is awesome in terms of its versatility. But then by comparison, you have something that's going to be a little bit more polarizing. Check that out. Look at the way the light play is. Again, up close, it's going to seem maybe a little oversized, but if I go ahead and keep my wrist down here and just tighten the shot in a bit, you can see nicely fits. Actually sits nice on the wrist, although I will say that the shape and some of the angles, it doesn't sit and flow as nice on the wrist as, you know, some of its more luxurious brethren in terms of the wear profile. You can see that there is a bit of a gap there. Of course, this does sit into your wrist, and the mid case itself is very slender, but you can see how much case is underneath there. Is anyone going to see that on your wrist besides you? No. But I will say that you may notice that this is going to be a little bit more top heavy than some of you may like, just because of the ergonomics. But you can see still a great flow, still a great drape to that beautiful bracelet there. So very, very nice. Can't be too mad there. These two both look really great on the wrist. So I think for this style of watch, some folks would prefer a smaller, of course, because it does have wider linkage there. It doesn't have a traditional step down on the bracelet. So if it was smaller, then it would shrink every dimension down and probably make it a touch more wearable for more wrist sizes. But I'm quite lucky that I have a decent sized wrist, so I can wear stuff like this, and I think it still looks quite at home. But with that said, let's get these off the wrist for some loom shots, light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, neither of these are really, you know, loom beasts by any means. I didn't even really charge them up, so let me at least hit them with a little black light there and kind of give them a little extra punch. Maybe some extra punch just directly on there. Okay, boom. So you can see neither of these are great in terms of trying to be a dedicated sports watch. They do have the water resistance, but in terms of the in pitch black legibility, not the greatest, but they're not horrible by any means. I'd say the Gentleman does have a slight advantage, although it does have probably less lume applied. I think it's applied just a bit thicker. So the surface area, although the indices are more, the applied indices have a strip of lume on the PRX, the Gentleman has the nice plops that are a little bit nicer applied. But you can see now, wow, in terms of which one's more dynamic, you can see, surprisingly, the Tissot has a bit of a chocolatey flavor to it. Sometimes with these black dials, you'll get more of a gray kind of hue in there, but here you can see it definitely airs more on kind of the warmer brown side. Here you can see, wow, just so many different facets and angles that are playing off of the light for the PRX. And yeah, you're not always going to be out in the middle of the field enjoying direct sunlight, so it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. Both of these watches have had their fair amount of wear, so instead of seeing, any type of production defects, you're more so just going to see, signs of wear on these two. So, you can see really nice, I'd say the more dynamic watch, again, is going to be the PRX, or the more sedate, kind of classy watch is going to be the Tissot. Since they're both Tissots, but the Gentleman. So for me, guys, closing thoughts, they both wear great. I think it's definitely a matter of preference. One has a bigger, easier to use crown. One has a smaller, harder to use crown. One's a little bit more eccentric. One is a little bit more sedate and classic and unoffensive. So for me, I'd say that you can probably break this down pretty objectively. The PRX is definitely going to be the one that has more pizzazz, more attitude, more personality. So it's going to be that kind of more standout, flashy piece. Where the Gentleman is going to be the more kind of everyday, kind of blue collar piece. I think it definitely is going to be something that's going to be ultra versatile. So if you're the type who's always looking for that kind of I don't want to say boring, but just more minimalist, kind of just gives you everything you need and nothing that you don't. The Gentleman could absolutely be a one watch. I don't think the PRX could be or should be a one watch, but that's because I have way too many watches. It obviously could be in anyone's collection. Anything can be what you want it to be. But for me, the Tissot definitely fills more of that kind of gap where, yes, you could, buy some straps, even though it would be a little bit harder to find at kind of with that odd lug width. You could dress this up, make it more of a dressy piece. You could also make it more casual. You can also make it a little bit more sporty. It has that leeway there, so it's going to be ultimately a lot more versatile than the PRX, but the PRX is going to be more of a pure affair, and it's going to be, generally, I think, more dynamic. It's a nicer watch in a lot of ways, but it's also more divisive a piece in all of those ways as well. So you'll find some folks that will love the PRX, and you'll find some folks that will just be like, what is that? That thing looks gross. That won't be a fan of the PRX. The Tissot isn't going to offend anybody, but it's not really going to wow anybody either. So I think, depending on your wear preferences, that'll kind of hopefully point you in the right direction. I would say out of these two watches, I definitely wear the PRX a lot more, but the PRX is also a gift from my wife, so that's probably why I wear it more. And it's a blue dial, and I tend to wear blue dials more often. And when it comes to black dials, it's very stiff competition. So the Tissot, maybe if it was in a blue dial configuration, maybe I'd want to wear it more. But for me, with a lot of watches, the more vanilla stuff probably gets worn less and less, because I have vanilla stuff that can be iconic to a brand. I don't think the Gentleman is really iconic to the Tissot brand, where the PRX is. The PRX is one of their top watches. And not just in, I think, volume, it's one of their top watches in design and heritage as well. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.